Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Kirk Gray.
Hey, Kirk, we were talking about getting questions and comments and stuff like that. And one of them that I mentioned to you, there's a recent question when we were talking offline was, what is there a standard for product lifetime? And I did talk to Chris Jackson about that particular question. And there isn't really a standard, and it's really a balance between your business plan, the market acceptance, customer satisfaction, a bunch of other stuff. We talked about it like that.
Right. And you mentioned, the question of reliability versus, question of technological obsolescence, that if you had a new phone and
$1,000 phone with a
$1,000 phone,
50 gigapixel camera on it or whatever.
Right. And you dropped it and it broke, you'd be pretty disappointed.
Yeah. Now, or if it just stopped working, it was working perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was designed to only last a week.
Right. And it just stopped working. Okay. Yeah. Either one of those cases would be bad and you wouldn't want to do it. But what about in a year and a half, the company, decided to come out with a
100 megapixel
camera, new software, and it wasn't backwardly compatible to your $1,000 phone you just bought a year and a half or 2 years ago.
And now it makes it just a brick because nothing will work on it, won't connect.
Right.
Anymore. They changed the system. The Wi-Fi system goes from 3 to 7, and then you can't connect anymore.
Right. And, one big company named after a fruit.
No names here. No names.
Yeah,
you don't want to go to jail. Those lawyers, I tell you.
Has been widely known to suddenly update their operating system on their fancy computers and not be backward compatible. That you're just going to have to upgrade your software.
If you want the new operating system.
If you want the new operating system.
You got to get new hardware. Yeah. But that's usually, you can buy a machine and you can run the old software for 10 years.
Right.
And if you update, then it won't work. Or usually you can get 3 to 5 updates before they push the boundaries of what's possible with the old machine. But a couple of years ago, they said, all right, our operating system will not accept any 32-bit programs anymore.
Right.
And so if there were a handful of programs I was using that were 32-bit, and those companies said, well, we're not updating to 64. And so they gave up the market. Or if I was a bigger fan of their software, I would have stayed with the old operating system. What price is progress,
Right. And these are a balance of this is where I feel like the focus on reliability of the intrinsic life of the hardware is kind of, to me, silly, because for the most part, it's always much, much longer than the technological obsolescence.
Well, you got to be careful with that always thing.
It's not always very, very, a very high percentage.
Well, there is
a product will still have plenty of life, even as it's become technologically obsolete. Like, for instance, Windows. Microsoft had a problem.
Nightmares, shutters.
Well, yeah, they had done so well in the enterprise world with businesses all, taking vast numbers of Dell and
HP and IBM. All of us had to kind of install their operating system.
Right. And so Microsoft had to be very careful about, because of their established base, in making their older hardware obsolete by requiring a new hardware, unlike Apple, who had more of the freedom to dictate that people
because their operating system worked on their hardware.
Right. That's right. And they had the fanboy base.
Hey, yeah, that's me.
Voted loyalists that would pay the more, they would pay that price, which was quite high for the hardware, considering it was basically the same as a PC hardware, there wasn't really any.
It looks way cooler though. Give me a break.
Maybe the ID was okay or better, but the circuit board inside looked about the same. Any Dell computer or Micron computer or any other, it was a lot of components, and they're all about the same. So the cost of that. But at the same time, I think Apple had a good reliability idea in keeping the hardware and software together and in control of themselves. Totally. Whereas Windows had to be compatible to HP, to Dell, to Micron, to any.
The issue we ran into, I remember some of the business PCs that we were working on. There was like 4 motherboard vendors that we could pick from, and 6 hard drive vendors we could pick from, and I don't know, 7 or 8 power supply vendors.
Yeah.
And what they found was that some combinations of those things just didn't work.
Right.
And it was like, how do you design something that's compatible with all of the various options that customers can stick in it? Like,
that's right.
If you make it an option that you can add memory chips to your computer, you've done this, I'm sure.
Right.
If it's not the right timing, if it's not in spec, or if it's not this or that, then it doesn't work. And so you'd have to really do some research, figure out, all right, I'm going to go buy some memory. Do I get the RAM bus one, or I get this one, or I get that one? What's the specs? Right. And then you can make it work. Whereas Apple, they only offered one package to upgrade the memory because they made a proprietary clip to put it in. Right. And it just worked.
And that's a fundamental of reliability. It's reducing variation will always help. Yep. And certainly the factor that Apple controlled it all was a very good move for reliability on their part, for sure. And they've always been in the high rankings for computer satisfaction as far as
customer
reliability. Customer satisfaction as far as reliability. And that was what I saw. A lot of the problems were the interface of Microsoft with the hardware designs of different companies. There's just too many variability. There's too many variabilities, and all those OEMs had different component suppliers.
But let's go to a different industry altogether where I don't think there's that much tech obsolescence. And I'm thinking of the drill press that I inherited from my father-in-law that he got, in the 50s. Right. It's cast iron. It works great. And I can still buy the belts for the belt drive between the motor and the spindle. And
the bits are the standard and kind of how they're, shaped.
They're just V belts, and and I've got 3 stacks of pulleys, or whatever the right term is for the wheels that these things on, and I can vary the speed that transfers from the motor to this other thing. Right. And it took a little bit of thinking. When do I move this to get it go faster? And a little experiment. I actually have the manual for it, so I was able to sort it out. Whereas today, they're electronically and variable speeds and all the other happy stuff. And those things only last, 10, 15 years. And then you got to buy a new one because it's a lot of vibration. There's a lot of dirt and everything else. And they're trying to make the electronics cheap. And part of the process, the modern tools in my workshop is I don't think it's planned obsolescence. It's just that it's a trade-off. If you can use a hand drill for 10 years, that's good. And you'll go buy that brand again. Whereas the hand drills or the power drills I got that were made in the 50s, they're heavy. They need a cord. You got to plug them in. They got an amazing amount of torque and power to them. And they work. Right. But the battery, having the lithium-ion battery, the portability, I've got, that's of course the thing that wears out. I've had 2 of the portable drills, but the motor, I haven't had any failures with the motors. The motors and the gearing and stuff on the electric drills today are night and day difference. Yet the old ones still work. So I don't have to go buy a modern drill if I have a power cord, which I do in my shop. So I have a cordless one for chores around the house or yard. Right. But there's some stuff that improving it just for improvement's sake and giving up the lifetime of it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
There's not a whole lot you could do with a drill press. Okay.
I can drill holes.
Exactly. I know. It's hard. Yeah, that's true. So, and I guess I'm sitting down here with two very well, not very, but very stressed machines called a washer and a dryer, and they've been operating for 10 years.
Well, you got to start shopping. I brought that up in another recent webinar, is that the if you bought it 10 years ago, the likelihood that it'll make it to 15 years is very, very low.
Well,
with normal household use.
But I'm going to wait till it actually it has its end of its life entitlement, whatever that is.
No, okay. I've talked to two different people in the white appliance business, and they have found through marketing that, and following customers' behaviors and so on, is that they can make a washer dryer that will last 50 years. It's got a switch and it's cast iron and it's bolted to the floor. My grandmother had one of those, and that's what I brought up. It was a Whirlpool, and I brought it up to the guy as an example, and he goes, yeah, we can make those. They're really expensive to ship and maintain and, and do everything else, but they just work because there's a motor and a drum, and that's it. There's a switch to turn the motor on, but they don't have delicate cycle. They don't have this.
And that's, and unfortunately, and, I look at my washer with all those selections, and, it's always normal.
Yeah. Normal, warm.
Warm. Yeah, that's it. And so all those features, now there is a feature, high efficiency, where it uses very low amounts of water,
less electricity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which requires more intelligence, the way it does the sequencing.
And it has sensors to tell when something's wet or dry and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but it gets, when it gets offset for the spin cycle, that thing it moves a few inches to the right or left.
That's where the bolting down goes.
But I don't think that the electronics circuit board in there is going to have a broken solder joint after a while. I don't,
have you looked at it? I looked at one of them, and the cables are all straight into a soldered connector, and there's no restraint or on those cables. So if the cable's got some mass to it, it's not going to last. Solder joints are not made to handle vibration.
Well, these have handled 10 years of,
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that they've designed it.
But I don't think they calculated how many times that thing could be offset, off balance. And
yeah. You'd be surprised at the kind of stuff they do with these things. And I've gotten to know white appliance guys pretty good, but they design it so it has a very low probability of failure as best they can do over 10 years. Because the probability of a customer buying that brand again, if it's worked for 10 years, is very, very high.
Right.
It's an easy decision. Hey, it worked for 10 years. It cost me $500. That's great. I'm off to get another one.
Right.
And then they'll be sticker shock because of inflation.
And you've seen washing machines sitting out in almost open sheds or different places.
Oh, they might. Just especially in my neighborhood.
Variety of
in the garages,
conditions and
freeze thaw cycles.
Right.
Yeah, and they account for a lot of that stuff, and heavy use and light use and all the other stuff.
I think they do great.
But they do a great job. There's no reason though that same machine can't last 20 years. But they have a very high set of betas on the sizing of the motor, the weight of the supports. I mean, structurally things will start failing.
Right.
And it costs you more to replace the guts of this thing than it would be to get a new one.
And they have to make it at a competitive cost too.
Yeah.
Yes, you could make one that would cost $2,000 and last 30 years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're betting that there's not going to be any technological improvements, possibly.
Oh, okay. But I blame the clothing industry. I bet you don't do your wife's laundry. I don't, because it's she said, you got to look at the label, and this one calls for this, and this setting, and this one calls for this, and this setting, and you can't put that in there, and vice versa. And I'm like, what? No, I buy stuff that goes normal, warm.
Well, fortunately, I have a wife that if it doesn't work, if you can't throw it in the washing machine, it gets thrown out. At normal setting with no special detergents.
I don't have that scenario.
But that's the thing. That's the thing is you're betting. You got this thing. You can say it's going to last. And I would say a bicycle or something. That we know there's not a whole bunch of technological revolution or evolution, but
on the high end there is, but you pay for it.
Yeah. So that you can, yes, the 10-year life on an appliance is probably pretty good. And if they don't have anything, the reason like I buy a new car is not so much I worry about mine failing as the technological improvements of airbags,
the safety type stuff. Yeah.
All the safety stuff is that motivates me to buy a new car. And of course, my neighbor across the street's got this 1965 car that I'm seeing him replace. I think he's replaced everything in the car.
But he can in his driveway.
Yeah.
Whereas if your new Subaru you open the hood and you go, where'd the engine go?
Right.
There's an oil filter here someplace. I have no idea what it looks like.
And forget about EVs. You won't. There's nothing to do. But apparently, they're getting a bad rap right now. Electric vehicles.
Yeah. The
liability, and that's surprising to me because the mechanics of oils and engines and air cleaners and all that.
Yeah, there's some of it is people have designed vehicles that previously were designing toasters, and then being facetious here, but there's something of building on a chassis that you had in the field for the last 30 years and making improvements on it.
Right.
It's got a downside too, is that it locks you into a particular chassis that it's too expensive to change, kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas the new guys on the block in cars have, done some really innovative things design-wise and made some really nice strides in the way vehicles are designed and built. The issue is what I've seen on that is that the adoption rate is slowed down because the number of charging stations that actually work is like 50%. The failure rate on those things is abysmal.
I know, and I pointed that out in a LinkedIn article I posted that I realize power systems like that, especially high fast power charging system, they're putting out 1,000 watts, or
they just they're not terribly good for your battery. Yet if you're doing a road trip, you don't want to spend 3 hours at a diner waiting for your car to charge.
Right. The faster you charge your battery, the worse it is for the battery's life.
Right. But then you're on your way, but either way, they're not working.
But it also for the charging station, it's got to crank out an amazing amount of power. And you're really going to be heating some IGBTs and some other power devices very quickly. They're going from really rapid heating, cooling to or ambient temperature.
Well, there's all kinds of. I don't know all the details. I've worked with a couple of the vendors that make these.
Right.
Well, I've worked with a couple of them, and it is a challenge. And then it's the price point and business model decisions. It's all being worked out, and how much compatibility with all the different models out there. It's the Wild West of that. And and that always surprised me is that the Tesla stations seem to have a really good design. They last, they work, they have a very low failure rate. So if you drive up to one, it's very likely it'll work. And then they fired the entire crew that makes those things. And it's like, all right, we're done.
Yeah. There's some issues with compatibility with the other EV chargers. It's not a standard yet.
It's not a standard yet. Yeah.
So that's a problem. But
there's going to be evolution in technology and sometimes in computers and cameras and stuff like that. There's cool new features or safety things in vehicles. There's stuff that it's worth updating. Yet the old system probably will work just fine for years and years and years. And in some industries, it's the real trick with technical obsolescence is understanding your market. Will they pay for the new feature, or do they just want it to work for a long time?
Right.
And if you get that wrong, you're not going to make money. That's the issue. So the technology we got is great. It's going to continue to evolve.
Right.
Yet I'm holding off. I'm not buying the new washing machine that has AI on it that'll tell me how to, do whatever.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. It'll know what kind of fabric that is that you threw in there, and you won't have to worry about your
it'll never start if I'm loading it. Then
you've mixed too many different things. No, I for instance, I have this computer. I've got a computer that's maybe 7, 8 years. I don't even know how old my PC is, but it's still runs. It's slow, but I'm talking to you on it now, and it's probably not going to fail from the components wearing out.
Yeah.
So, just the fact that I want higher speeds and faster access, and that's about it. So I can't justify it, though, for 1,000 or, I guess a good one is about 1,600 or so. And I think the Apple, always thinking about going to an Apple, but
you should. I'm trying to see how old my, I got a laptop here.
You have a Apple, a Mac Air or an Air?
Yeah, it's a Mac. It's a MacBook Air, and I'm trying to see
how old it is.
Yeah, I guess I have to get some model number or something. It'd take me too long to find, but I don't update the operating system anymore on it because it won't work on the next one that it's available
there they
for.
Are. Yeah, they're going to force you.
No, they're not going to force me anywhere. I use this for recording, and it's...
Oh, this is a dedicated.
It's a dedicated, because I don't travel at all now for business, so it's got a small screen, so it doesn't have a big hard reflective surface.
Yeah.
And it works with because the heavy lifting done today for recording is in the cloud.
Yeah.
So all it's doing is sending packets back and forth to the server. And as long as I got a decent connection, it's good enough for audio. And that's why we don't put video on these things, because it sucks up a bunch of bandwidth. Plus, then who wants to look at us and with our bad lighting and bad haircuts and stuff?
It's like, what do I do with all my old phones? I don't sell them. I have an old iPhone 6S, and I think God is so powerful. I've got this handheld computer, but it doesn't, Well,
I solved that. I had an old iPad that I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I put it in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It runs we have a music subscription. And so it runs music out to and it does Wi-Fi out to the speakers we have in the room. And the other thing is my wife comes in and she checks the weather on it, and it pull up a weather app, and those work. And I think it does one or two other things, but it's kind of just dedicated for sitting on the counter in the kitchen. It doesn't need cellular, so it doesn't cost us anything.
Right. I mean, I have this device that has 2,000 songs in it and videos and stuff, and I can, but I just...
Oh, there's another technology obsolescence thing to think about is the little, I don't want to say their name, but various companies, including the one with the fruit name, have come out with little devices you plug into your network, and you can say a code word or keyword, like on Star Trek, you would say computer, and they have different code words or names and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you can ask them, what's the weather? What's this? And one of the companies that also happens to be a big retailer, was losing money selling these things, these little hockey pucks and other devices that you can do whatever. And they found that it's become a very expensive device for them to support, because the vast majority of people use it to check what's the weather, what time is it, and setting alarms when they're cooking. Setting up alarms or controlling their lights or doing the other voice command type stuff. And their business model was that if we have these available to everybody, people will just voice command, buy this for me, get me another quart of milk, put this on the list.
Right.
And that doesn't happen. People don't shop by voice. That hasn't happened yet. So their obsolescence is their choices in the business model. The technology works just fine.
Yeah.
And the business models, you don't buy a new one every year because it has new features or the software, whatever, goes obsolete. It's just a speaker and a microphone. And so they update the software and you get new benefits and features and stuff like that. People are writing apps for them, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the choice they made, instead of charging, $500 for each one of these things that will last for probably 10 years on my counter, which I wouldn't pay $500 for.
Right.
They went low in order to get market share with the hope that you would do shopping for it on it. And so the technology itself is not obsolete, but the application of the technology didn't find a viable market.
Yeah. Some I've seen were obsolete before they could even get anything to market. One particular company I worked for, it was called Data Play. They existed for about 2 maybe years or whatever, and their whole idea was to make this little floppy drive that's about the size of a quarter that you were going to put into a little iPod thing. And each one of the little floppy drives was going to have an album on it, and you'd go off and they would.
And then Apple comes out with the.
It was just ridiculous, and I saw the amount of money and investment, and they even asked me if I wanted to come join the company, and of course, they just collapsed very quickly.
Well, I saw a toy that does something like this. It's a little you would buy different little figurines, characters from different children's stories or fables or whatever, so that you'd have the rabbit and the hare and the tortoise. Yeah. And so to be a little figurine with the hare and the tortoise, and then you would buy this little disc similar to what you just described. Right. And you could put it in there and it would tell you the story it would basically read the book for you. It was an audio book. Right. But you didn't have to. You could buy that tortoise and the hare and put little red Robin Hood in the thing, or little little Red Riding Hood. That's what I'm thinking of. You could put that chip in and it would tell you that story. And their business model is that each book cost $80. The little audio book for like a 20, not even 20-minute read. And absurd. And the little figurines part so you could have the visual related to each book. And they were like $100 each. And they're like, I don't think so. To me, that's kind of the short life of a Blu-ray or something like that. That they work so hard to get this, really cool
DVDs
technology
to Blu-ray, and now it's so obsolete. Even any removable media is now fairly obsolete. CDs, DVDs, everything's streaming. I don't even have. I think I have a DVD player somewhere.
I unplugged mine finally because I kept trying to turn the TV on. It was kind of like, I'm still here. I'm still here. Exactly. I'm still here.
Play me. I'm sorry. You can't find, DVD. I guess you can find them, but it's pretty ridiculous to even think about it.
Well, anyway, we've talked about obsolescence enough. We might be going obsolete ourselves at some point.
Someday we will be. That's for sure.
AI will take our job. We'll be technologically obsolete.
For sure.
When they can do podcasts as creative and informative and useful and all the other happy stuff with people that our listeners have told us that we are. Maybe that's back to the confirmation bias piece. But anyway, there's the idea of getting your product to last long enough is a business decision. Is you got to define what long enough is, and it's not trivial to do it. It's when do you switch from it's good enough, we're not going to convince our market to buy the new one because we added another pixel to the camera kind of thing in the life cycle, and then convert it over to one that lasts 10 years and it's perfectly good and functional. Every product technology in product lines go through this arc, and it's always a judgment call as to when you switch over to make something last a long time. And I think what Kirk often writes about and talks about is that, that cell phone still does what it's supposed to do. It doesn't do the whiz bang new feature stuff that you may or not need. Right. But if you're using it to make a phone call because you got, need a ride, it works. It works just fine. So anyway, the idea of this technology obsolescence, how's that affecting you? What kind of things you've run into or run across, or what things have tripped you up? How does your company deal with that? How do you design a 10-year product but plan on replacing it every year? I mean, just think of the data analysis. If half of your product is replaced after a year, do you know how long the other half are actually in the field? It's still running, and how long do you carry spares for and all that stuff? That all matters, and it all costs money one way or the other.
And are they being replaced because they're failing, or because because there's a technological improvement and significant benefit or advantage?
Yeah, and to your bottom line if that's your business model.
Yeah.
But let us know how it's working for you, and comments or questions like that, like we always ask for, are always welcome. This particular question sparked a couple of top episodes for us. But let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. A couple of ways to get in touch with us there. Kirk and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. So before we become technologically obsolete and our old computers are still connected, I guess I'll say, talk to you soon, Kirk. Take care. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.